Hi everyone, my name is Matt Miller and I'm a tutor with the Butler University Speakers Lab. Today what I'll be showing you is a very basic outline of a speech, essentially the bare bones of what you need to know about all the elements of a speech. So as you probably know, every speech is made up of an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So logically, we're going to start with the introduction. And within the introduction there are several elements we need to discuss. First would be the attention getter. The attention getter is the very first thing that comes out of your mouth. It's designed to catch the audience's attention, hence the name. So you have to consider that before you're going to give your speech, your audience is probably going to be talking with one another, playing on their cell phone, daydreaming, what have you. So what you need to do is something to really grab their attention, to get their focus on you and on your speech. So the best kind of attention getters are either humorous or shocking. And specific examples would be anecdotes, jokes, statistics, or questions. The next element of the introduction is the credibility statement. And this is essentially a statement that asserts yourself as a credible person. It basically shows that you are an authority. So you're telling your audience why they should listen to you, why they should trust you, and why they should believe what you're saying. Now, you don't necessarily need this. It really just depends on the type of speech that you're giving and whether you personally want it. So this is a decision you have to make yourself. So the next part of your introduction is the thesis statement. And the thesis statement is very important. Essentially what it does is summarize your entire speech in just one sentence. So you want to make sure that this sentence is both powerful and phrased as a statement. You don't want it to be phrased as a question. Now if you're having problems developing your thesis statement, here's what I suggest. Let's say you're giving a 7-minute speech. Try to summarize your speech in just 5 minutes, then 3 minutes, and then 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then one sentence. If you continually boil down your speech, you're going to get rid of all the excess and eventually develop a strong thesis statement. So let's pretend that we're writing a speech on global internet access and the importance of it, which I may or may not have already done. And let's try to write a thesis statement for this kind of speech. What you would not want to say is, I think internet access is important. Or, I believe the world would be better off if everyone had access to the internet. Because those aren't thesis statements. They're not strong. A thesis statement for this kind of speech might look like, internet access must be established as a fundamental human right. The last part of your introduction is the preview. Now, many students leave this out of their presentation, so make sure that it's in yours. What the preview does is tell the audience where you're going, basically what you're going to tell them. It might sound weird, but in every single speech that you give, you should do 3 things. First, tell the audience what you're going to tell them, preview. Then, tell them, that would be the body, and then tell them what you told them, the review. This will help your audience know where you're going to be at throughout your entire speech, and that way they won't be lost. And that concludes the introduction. But before we move on to the body, we have to transition. We can't just jump from the introduction to the body because that feels weird and it doesn't sound good. So make sure you have a transition statement before you move on to the body. And now we get to move on to the body of the speech. Recall that the body is the second part of your speech. Now, the body is very customizable. It's going to be very different for each person because it really depends on what type of speech you're giving. And there are several types of speeches. One would be an informative speech, where you're basically telling your audience about something they don't already know about. A persuasive speech, where you're trying to get your audience to believe something, to change their mind. You might be giving an entertaining speech, where you're just trying to make your audience laugh. Or you might be giving a demonstrative speech, where you're trying to show your audience how to do something. And depending on the type of speech you give, your organizational pattern will change. For example, with an informative speech, you might have the pattern of information, application, implication. For a persuasive speech, you might use Monroe's motivated sequence. You might use problem cost solution, or you might use problem solution benefit. The possibilities really are endless. So let's continue on the global internet access trend, and we can probably agree that we would use a persuasive speech for that. Now, if we use problem cost solution, we could say that the problem would be that the world does not have access to the internet, or at least large parts of the world don't. The cause would be that world leaders don't recognize access to the internet as a human right. They don't see it as something important. So the solution would be to add internet access to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Now, no matter what type of speech you're giving, we can go by the rule of thumb that you should generally have 2, probably 3 main speaking points within your body. And then underneath each of those main speaking points, you should probably have 2 or 3 sub-speaking points. And that concludes the body, and just like before, we can't go from the body to the conclusion without a transition, so make sure you write a transition statement. And now we're at the conclusion of the speech. Remember, the conclusion is the last part of your speech. And essentially what you do in the conclusion is you wrap everything up. You tie it all back together. Make sure you're not giving any new information in the conclusion. And there are 2 main things that you want to make sure that you do in every conclusion. The first of which is give a review. Recall that we discussed a preview and a little bit of the review in the introduction. Now what the review does is tell the audience what you've already told them, but you want to do it in a quick, short sentence. You should also restate your thesis statement. Remember, the thesis statement was in the introduction, so just say it again here at the end. Now, when you conclude your speech, do not say, "I'm done," or "the end," or "that's it." Those are not good conclusions. The best conclusions will tie back into the attention getter. Remember, the attention getter was the very first thing that you said. So, if for your attention getter you told a story, maybe here you could tell the last bit of that story. You can conclude it. If you told a joke at the beginning, maybe here you can give the punchline. Or if you asked a question at the beginning, here maybe you can give the answer. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That's all there is to writing a speech. It's pretty simple. Today, we discussed the very basic outline of a speech. First examining the introduction, wherein we had the attention getter, the credibility statement, the thesis, and the preview. We then looked at the body, in which we talked about the various types of speeches and organizational patterns. Finally, we looked at the conclusion, in which we should review and restate the thesis statement, as well as tie back into the attention getter. So I hope you've learned a lot today, and I wish you the best of luck on all your future speech writing.